Hey everybody, Aaron here. Welcome back to another anime review. Today we're looking at Irae, or Day of Wrath as it's called in English. As many of you guys know, I actually was doing episodic reviews for Irae, and I went up to, I think, episode 5. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was episode 5. And, I had so many other prior engagements I had to start doing on that day that we were reviewing that, and even more so, it's just other things started coming and going, and I wasn't enjoying the reviews for it because honestly this show was, I'll talk about more in a second, but it got to the point that I didn't want to do reviews for the show anymore, and I just flat out waited for a little while. But then I did finally catch back up because I had made a promise to you guys that I would review the whole show. It had been one of the big ones that won on my poll of various other shows to review for the 2017 fall season, and I had to make sure that I kept that commitment. I wanted to make sure that I kept that promise and reviewed it. Now, let's just say, this 11 episode show was possibly the worst thing I've seen in 2017. There's a reason specifically. I finished this actually several days ago. I finished it on Thursday, I believe. And, I waited until the day of New Year's Eve to bring this review out because I want 2018 to be a brand new year, folks. I want that to be a year of joy and a year of new beginnings. And I'll tell you right now, if I start out this being one of my reviews for 2018, I will think that's a bad thing. Now, I want to first explain something that I think it needs to be explained. Irae had some things going for it. It had very nice animation. The studio, I have to always look up the name, by the way, so I do apologize. I'm looking at them out right now for the studio name. ACGT, as they're called. They have done various other works. I've known some of them are hit or miss, but they actually did a decent job with the animation, and I wanted to say the flow of the show in general. I did think Irae had a decent look to it. And even the music was not too bad. The voice acting, same thing with that. The problem was that, I think that the way this was set up was not a very good way of being set up. And I think that even the way it ended was even 10 times worse. Now, our story, in case you guys are brand new to Irae, is that we follow a main character named Rin, who, or I think, actually, I'm sorry, it's Ren. I always say Ren. I always think of Blue Exorcist for some reason in my head. Ren is a young boy who lives in a current time period, this present day, and has been having weird dreams lately. He keeps dreaming of these things like guillotines and all this other stuff that just seems odd and unnatural. And then lo and behold, he ends up meeting some very interesting people of sorts that tell him he has a latent power inside of that is waiting to be awoken. And all of a sudden, the show just goes into this crazy thing of him having supernatural powers, people being, I want to say, people from World War II. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on in the show, and it's very hard to keep up with because it's very poorly done. Now, I want to say the debacle with the show in general, it came from episode 0. Episode 0 had where it starts off with this almost prequel-like story where we see World War II, or at least an altered version of World War II, and we see a ritual going on, a sacrifice of sorts going on. And from here things happen, and it leads to then episode 1 of Irae, which is the true episode beginning. But that's where I think Irae started falling for a lot of people right there, is that it was a very confusing way of starting. It was something that made no sense. And from the people I know who play the visual novel, because this is based off a video game visual novel, they had told me that apparently that part that was explained in episode 0 was something you don't get actually until near the end of the game, where that's a special thing you unlock to understand more of the backstory and figure out what's going on from here, and various other means of things. But what was weird was that, this wasn't the beginning of this weird show, in terms of what it was doing wrong. Various episodes were going around explaining things and skipping parts apparently from the visual novel and doing all this other stuff with it, that it became just this weird collage of episodes that you really didn't understand what the hell was going on. You didn't understand what Ren's power was. You didn't understand why, anyone had powers for that matter. You understood that, yes, it had something to do with World War II, and it had something to do with sacrifice, but at the same time, you really didn't get the full grasp of it. And I think even by episode 11, you don't get the full grasp of it. It's very hard to follow. Now, I know some advocates for the thing were very against my reviews for it. They were like, oh, it's a great show. What's wrong with you? You're stupid. You don't understand what's going on. And I'm like, yeah, okay, so tell me what's going on without having played the visual novel. Did you ever play the visual novel? And all of them, the people that did have the issues with me, all said the same line, and it was something that made me laugh, was that, yes, they played the visual novel. Here's the problem with the show like this. you shouldn't have to play a visual novel to understand an anime. It's like the same issue with like the King's Game had, where it started off and it's with the whole story of the sequel to a manga. So for many people, they didn't understand what the hell was going on. They didn't even really get the idea behind the King's Game until it was kind of fully explained. And it got worse and worse as time goes by, because the Deus Irae was like King's Game in many ways. But I'll be honest with you, I think King's Game was better than Deus Irae. I know I'm going to trigger people left and right with that comment, but it's the reality of it. Like, at least you can understand what the flow of King's Game was. Deus Irae, you really don't understand it, and then we get this just ending. It doesn't have any conclusion to it. It has nothing. We have a fight that doesn't even involve our main character, for that matter, and we're like, wait, what the hell? So are we getting a season 2? From what I hear, by the way, we're supposed to get one, I should say. That's amazing in its own right, but it just ends. And I'm like, what type of show does that? Like, it didn't even have a thing at the end saying, hey, continued in season 2. It just abruptly ends. You see the credits. That's it. Deus Irae had the potential to be a good adaptation. It definitely did. But I feel like the execution, I feel like they didn't know what they wanted to do at times. There was a lot of fan service at times where it was almost unnecessary fan service. Like, some of the girls at the show were half naked half the time in just brief moments, mind you, but it was like, there was panty shots and there was all this other stuff, and I'm like, why? Is this show supposed to be like supernatural horror at one point and drama and all this other stuff, and then all of a sudden you have that? And don't get me wrong, I know some people are gonna go, well, other shows have that, and it's like, yes, that's true, but the thing is that has to flow. Like, if you're gonna use ecchi stuff in any anime, anything whatsoever, you have to have a flow into the story. It's supposed to be like a goofball type thing or a comedy thing. Here you have one episode where a guy just found that he's like has all his supernatural powers, and then he's still reeling from the shock of it, and then you have a panty shot for some reason the next episode, and an explanation that's not even really a good explanation of things to happen. It's like, what? It needs a flow. It needs to be something that's like a comedic type of thing if you're to do that. Fan service is funny or works, at least when it actually is used correctly. Like when they introduced Marie, that was okay the way they did that, because Marie was actually kind of weird, but the fact was that you started understanding that her mindset was also very weird, and how she came to be was weird. So it's like, okay, I forgive that a little bit more, but it wasn't enough to save it. When we start learning more about Ren's friend, I forgot the guy's name off the top of my head, which I really should not have, but I did forget it, and I apologize for that. But Ren's friend, who basically starts the series off where they apparently get into this big fight that they try to kill each other. He becomes like the last fighter of the series, where he's the one who gets into the final fight with the one dude at the end, and it was interesting to say the least. But I think that, despite the animation being good for Deus Irae, despite the story being like okay at times, it never was a good thing to actually enjoy. That's why if I had to review Deus Irae between an A through F, folks, I'm giving it an F. I failed Deus Irae. I think Deus Irae is a show that really had the potential to be amazing and just came up flat. It had the potential, it had the means of being something different, I think, in the world of anime. And because, I mean, you don't get too often with these stories that have this kind of flow to them, like where, okay, so it's a different type of flow. They're trying to mix things up. They don't want to make it where it's a story that you right away understand in one episode. And I agreed with one of my subscribers about that, because they commented about that. But at the same time, if that's the case, you need to make sure that you present everything in, bite-sized information things. Like, you have to be like, oh, okay, so we'll explain this part now, we'll explain that part, and we'll just be able to go from here. It'll all make sense eventually. You will get the whole gist of it. However, Deus Irae from episode 0, which, because it does count as a prequel, even though it's technically an OVA episode, because it's not actually the 11-part episode if you go on Mal, from episode 0 to episode 11, this show just goes from one thing to another, and it's super hard to find any understanding of what the hell's going on. And that's the problem with Deus Irae, and that's why I can't pass it in good, I want to say good thought process. I really can't. It's just one of those shows that, you don't want to watch. I'll be honest with you. You want to avoid it. If you love the visual novel and you're like, oh man, I want to watch the anime for it, don't. Because I feel like the visual novel is probably amazing, and I really do want to go play it myself, because I love the concept of it. But at the same time, you know, I think that it was poorly executed. You know, stuff like Steins Gate visual novel, for example, even Chaos Child or Chaos, I think Chaos Head, excuse me, too. Those are stories that they were visual novels first, but they were adapted very well. You know, maybe not so much with Chaos Head or even Chaos Child, but they were adapted a lot better than Deus Irae, because they kept the story, they kept everything going with it, and it worked. You know, I wanted to end 2017 on the last bad thing that came out from this year, I think, in my mind, and that's why I figured you guys would enjoy this review. I know it's a little late at night, but I figured it'd be a better way to do it now than later on tomorrow, which is New Year's. I don't want to start 2018 with a show that gets an F. I really did want to do that. But anyways, guys and girls, what did you think about Deus Irae? If you saw it with me, let me know in the comments below. I would appreciate, you know, keeping everything respectful. If you did love Deus Irae, you know, hey, fight for it. Tell me why you thought the show was so good. Why did you think it was intelligent, etc. But remember, guys and girls, if you saw or played the visual novel, you gotta remember that the story for everyone else was not understandable. So just make sure you understand that when you comment down below. Anyways, have a great night, everyone. Until our paths cross together the next review, have a great New Year coming up soon. God bless you all. Bye-bye.